Kenneth Sullivan made his billions selling miracle drugs to desperate families. But when his own 3 sons needed a miracle, every specialist in America told him the same thing: impossible. For 3 years, the Sullivan triplets, Juan, Dave, and Tom, lived in a medical wing that cost more than most hospitals. Private doctors, round-the-clock monitoring, experimental therapies that charged $15,000 per session. And still, the boys didn't speak, didn't make eye contact, barely responded to their own father's voice. Kenneth threw money at the problem until his bank account looked like a phone number. Nothing changed. Then one night, alone in his office at 2 a.m., he decided to review the ICU security feed. Just routine monitoring. Just another sleepless night, wondering if his sons would ever know who he was. What he saw on that grainy footage made his blood run cold. It wasn't a doctor in the room with his boys. It wasn't a nurse or a specialist. It was Andrea, the night cleaning woman. And what she was doing had been strictly, explicitly, absolutely forbidden. Before we continue, hit subscribe, like this video, and tell me in the comments where in the world you're watching from. I believe this story found you today for a reason. The Sullivan estate sat on 40 acres outside Greenwich, Connecticut, 18,000 square feet of Georgian colonial architecture that echoed with emptiness. Marble floors, vaulted ceilings, crystal chandeliers hanging over hallways no one walked through. The medical wing had been added 2 years ago. Hospital-grade air filtration, monitoring equipment, 3 custom pediatric beds surrounded by machines that beeped through the silence. It cost more than most hospitals, but inside there was no life. Juan, Dave, and Tom Sullivan were 3 years old, born 8 weeks premature the same day their mother died. Catherine Sullivan had hemorrhage during the emergency C-section, bled out while her sons took their first breaths in separate incubators. She held on long enough to hear they were alive. And she was gone. Kenneth stood in that delivery room holding her wedding ring, listening to machines flatline, while down the hall his sons screamed in plastic boxes. He hadn't held them that day. Too fragile, the nurses said. 3 years later, he still hadn't. The boys sat in their beds now, staring at the wall with empty eyes. Not curious, not sad, just empty. One rocked back and forth, hands flapping in repetitive motions the specialist called self-soothing. Dave pressed his forehead against the bed rail, thud, 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 a rhythm no one could stop. Tom sat perfectly still, rigid, blank as a doll. They'd never spoken, not one word. They didn't make eye contact. When Kenneth stood at the observation window each morning, they never looked back. He could watch for an hour, and they wouldn't know he existed. They didn't respond to touch. Kenneth had tried, early on, sat by their beds, read to them, but they flinched when he reached for them, screamed when he picked them up. Dr. Marcus Brennan, head physician, Harvard-educated, expensive, had been gentle but firm. They're medically fragile, Mr. Sullivan. Overstimulation triggers meltdowns. It's better to let trained staff handle their care. So Kenneth stopped trying. Now he wrote checks, hired the best neurologists, therapists, specialists in the country. Medications adjusted weekly. Experimental therapies at $15,000 per session. Protocols and data and monitoring. We're doing everything possible, Dr. Brennan assured him each month in his calm, credentialed voice. These cases are complex. We'll continue observation. But nothing changed. The boy's eyes remained empty. Kenneth told himself he was doing everything right, giving them the best care money could buy, following expert advice, being responsible. But the truth, the one he couldn't speak, was that he was terrified of his own sons. Because they looked like Catherine. One had her nose. Dave had her chin. Tom had her eyes. Eyes that never focused on anything, but still they were hers. The boys were living reminders of what he'd lost. And what he'd caused. Because Catherine hadn't wanted to get pregnant yet. She wanted to wait, build her career, travel. But Kenneth pushed. He wanted a family, an heir, something beyond his pharmaceutical empire. And it killed her. So every morning he stood at that observation window for 60 seconds, watching three boys who would never know him, then left for his office where problems could be solved with money and control. The medical wing smelled like disinfectant. No toys, no pictures, just machines monitoring lives that seemed barely lived. Kenneth thought he'd tried everything, thought there was nothing left but to wait and hope the specialists found answers. Thought his sons were beyond reach. But Kenneth had never met Andrea Boykin. Andrea Boykin started cleaning the Sullivan estate 3 months ago. Night shift, 11 p.m. to 3 a.m., 4 nights a week. $18 an hour. It was her third job. Her day started at 6 in the morning at Murphy's Diner. Greasy eggs, burnt coffee, dollar tips. That shift ended at 2. Then Palmer's Grocery until 9. Stocking shelves with products she couldn't afford. Then home for an hour, sometimes just her car, before the night shift at the mansion. She slept between shifts sometimes. Reclined seat, alarm set, prayers for rest that never came. The reason was simple. Her grandmother, Lucille, raised Andrea after her parents died when she was 7. Lucille worked 2 jobs back then, but never missed a school play. She braided Andrea's hair every Sunday before church, taught her to pray, to work, to stand straight, even when the world tried to make you small. Now Lucille was 81 with late-stage dementia at Riverside Memory Care. $4,200 a month. Andrea was 3 months behind. The letter came 2 weeks ago. Pay $12,600 in 14 days, or Lucille would be transferred to county care. Andrea had visited county care once. The smell, urine and bleach, and something worse. Patients strapped to beds. One nurse for 40 residents. People calling for help that never came. She would die before letting her grandmother end up there. So she worked 18-hour days, every shift she could get. The first night she saw the boys, she was mopping outside the medical wing. Past midnight, the house silent except for expensive machinery humming behind closed doors. Then she heard it, a low keening sound. Not crying, something worse. Andrea stopped. The sound came from the medical wing. She wasn't supposed to go in outside assigned hours. But that sound went through her like a knife. She opened the door. Juan rocking back and forth, hands flapping. Dave hitting his forehead against the bed rail, thud, thud, thud. Tom sitting still, tears streaming, silent except for that hollow keening. No one was with them. Andrea's breath caught. These weren't patients. They were babies, and they were alone. She thought of Marcus, her baby brother, born premature. Doctors said he'd never talk, never learn. But Grandma Lucille sang to him, held him for hours, spoke to him like he understood. Marcus said his first word at 5. Mama. He died at 14. Car accident. Andrea held his hand while machines beeped their failing rhythm. She never got to see who he'd become. These boys had the same empty eyes Marcus used to have, before Grandma loved him back to life. Andrea wasn't supposed to be in this room, but she walked in anyway, pulled a chair between the beds, sat down, started humming one of Grandma's old spirituals. His eye is on the sparrow. Soft and low. Dave stopped hitting his head. Tom's crying slowed. One turned toward her voice. Andrea kept humming. Didn't touch them. Didn't speak. Just let the melody fill the silence. 5 minutes. Then she stood, pushed the chair back, left before anyone could see. Walking to her car, hands shaking, Andrea whispered into the darkness. Lord, I don't know what you're asking me to do, but if you put those boys in my path, there's a reason. Show me. The parking lot was empty, the sky black, but something shifted in her chest, something that felt like purpose. Andrea couldn't have known that what she'd just started would cost her everything and save 3 lives. Every night Andrea cleaned, she found a reason to check the medical wing. Spill in the hallway. Restocking supplies. Routine sanitation. And every night, she stayed a little longer. Week 1, she just hummed while she worked. Wiped surfaces, mopped floors, always humming Grandma's spirituals. The boys seemed calmer. Juan's rocking slowed. Dave stopped hitting his head. Tom's rigid posture softened. Week 2, Andrea started talking to them. Soft and low. Hi, babies. It's Miss Andrea. You're safe. I'm right here. She didn't expect responses. Just wanted them to know they weren't alone. I see you, sweet boy, she'd whisper to Juan. You're doing so good, baby, to Dave. It's okay to cry, honey. Miss Andrea's here, to Tom. Week 3, something changed. Andrea was wiping Dave's bed rail when his hand moved. Reached toward her. His small fingers brushed her wrist, then wrapped around her thumb. He held on. Andrea froze. His hand was warm and real and holding hers. That's right, baby, she whispered. I'm here. That night, she cried in her car for 20 minutes. The next shift, she brought something from home. A small cloth doll Grandma Lucille had sewn for Marcus. Faded blue fabric, button eyes, one arm shorter than the other. Marcus had slept with it until he was 8. Andrea placed it in Tom's bed. This was my brother's. He loved it. I think you will too. Tom didn't react, just stared at the wall with empty eyes. But the next night, Tom was holding the doll against his chest. The night after, all 3 boys seemed calmer when she arrived, like they were waiting for her. During the day, the medical team rotated through. Neurologist at 9, speech therapist at 11, developmental specialist at 2. They took notes, ran tests, adjusted medications, spoke about protocols and data points. The boys screamed when touched, flinched when approached. The specialists noted it with calm detachment. One evening, Andrea heard Dr. Brennan's voice from Kenneth's office. No significant progress. We've adjusted medications and implemented new sensory protocols, but developmental delays remain persistent. I recommend extending the contract another 6 months. These cases require patience. Andrea's hands tightened on her mop. She wanted to scream. Have you tried just holding them? Singing to them? Treating them like children instead of specimens? But she was the cleaning lady. No one asked her opinion. Kenneth came to the observation window every morning. Andrea saw him finishing her shift, standing there 60 seconds, face pale, shoulders rigid. Then he'd leave. She saw the pain in his face, the grief, but also the fear. He was terrified of his own sons. 3 weeks in, Andrea was singing His Eye is on the Sparrow while folding blankets. Her voice soft, filling quiet spaces between beeping machines. Dave was watching her, not vaguely looking, actually watching. Eyes focused, present. Then he smiled. Small, fleeting, gone almost immediately, but real. Andrea's heart nearly exploded. She gripped the bed to keep standing. There you are, she whispered. I knew you were in there. The specialists wrote in their charts. Patient exhibits persistent empty effect. No eye contact. No social engagement. Prognosis remains poor. But Andrea knew better. She thought she was being careful. Thought no one noticed the extra time in that wing. Thought she could keep helping without anyone asking questions. But someone was watching. Dr. Brennan caught her on a Thursday night. Andrea was in the boys' room, cleaning card in the hallway as cover, sitting between their beds, singing softly. One had fallen asleep, holding her sleeve. The door opened. Dr. Brennan stood there, face unreadable. He looked at Juan's hand wrapped around her sleeve. At Tom clutching the cloth doll. At Dave's calm breathing. Miss Boykin. A word. Andrea's heart dropped. She carefully freed her sleeve from Juan's grip, followed Brennan into the hallway. He closed the door with a soft click. The hallway was cold. The fluorescent lights hummed. Brennan's voice was ice. You were hired to clean, not to interact with patients. These boys are medically fragile. Their condition is complex. We cannot have untrained staff introducing variables into their treatment. Andrea's voice shook. They were crying and I don't care what you thought. You're not qualified to make care decisions. You don't understand the delicate balance we're maintaining. I wasn't trying to. If I ever see you in that wing outside your designated duties, you're terminated. Immediately. No warning. Do you understand? Andrea nodded, her throat too tight to speak. Brennan softened slightly. I know you mean well. I can see you care. But this is beyond your scope. Leave their care to the professionals. He walked away, shoes clicking on marble. Andrea stood there, shaking. That night in her car, Andrea stared at the torn ceiling fabric. If she lost this job, her grandmother would be transferred in 9 days. 9 days. $12,600. Impossible. But if she walked away from those boys, she kept seeing Juan's face turning toward her voice. Dave smiled. Tom holding that doll like it was his only anchor. They were getting better. She knew it. But Brennan was right. She wasn't qualified. She was a cleaning woman who barely graduated high school. Who was she to think she knew better than Harvard-educated specialists? Andrea closed her eyes. God, she whispered. I don't understand. If you don't want me helping them, why do I feel like I'm supposed to be there? Why does it hurt so much to walk away? Silence. No answer. No sign. No peace. Just the weight of choice pressing on her chest. She remembered Marcus's empty eyes the day doctors said he'd never speak. Remembered Grandma's voice, tired but fierce. Baby, love doesn't need a degree. It just needs willing hands. Andrea opened her eyes. She made her decision. She would keep going to that room, keep singing, keep showing up night after night, even if it meant risking everything. Because some things matter more than safety. Some things matter more than money. Some things you do because walking away would kill something inside you that no paycheck could bring back. Andrea would risk it all. What Andrea didn't know was that in 6 days, one of those boys would stop breathing, and she'd be the only one there. 4 or 5 more nights, Andrea went to that room. Every night, terrified she'd be caught. Every shift, expecting Dr. Brennan to be standing there with security. But every night, the boys calm when she arrived. One started reaching for her the moment she walked in. Dave would hum along when she sang, off-key and quiet, but trying. Tom slept through the night when she was there, something the medical charts said he'd never done. But the fear was crushing her. Day 6, Andrea was refilling coffee at Murphy's Diner when her phone rang. Riverside Memory Care. Her stomach dropped. She stepped into the bathroom, locked the stall, answered. Miss Boykin, this is Janet from billing. We need payment by Friday, or we're initiating transfer. 3 days. I'm sorry, but we can't wait longer. Andrea hung up, stared at her bank app. $340. She needed $12,600. She sat in that bathroom and sobbed into her hands. That night, lying in her car before her shift, Andrea thought about Marcus. She hadn't let herself think about that night in years. Marcus was 14, passenger in a car driven by his friend's older brother. Andrea had said yes when Marcus asked to go. She was 19, exhausted from working 2 jobs. She should have driven him. Should have said no. The call came at 11 p.m. Drunk driver ran a red light. Andrea rushed to the hospital. They wouldn't let her see him at first. Too critical. When they finally let her in, Marcus was on a gurney, unconscious, bleeding internally. Machines beeping. Tubes everywhere. Andrea held his hand. It was still warm. I'm here, baby, she whispered. I'm right here. I love you. He never woke up. Died at 2:47 a.m. while she held his hand and begged God to let him stay. For years after, the what-ifs nearly destroyed her. What if she'd driven him? What if she'd said no? What if she'd been more careful? What if she'd just loved him better? And now she was facing it again. What if she walked away from those boys and something happened? What if they needed her and she wasn't there? Andrea sat up. 10:30 p.m. Her shift started in 30 minutes. She closed her eyes and prayed. God, I'm scared. I'm so scared. I don't know how to pay for Grandma's care. I don't know if I'm doing the right thing. But I can't walk away. I can't. If this is what you're asking me to do, then I'm saying yes. Even if it costs me everything. Even if I lose my job and Grandma gets transferred and I lose it all. Guide my hands. Protect them. And please, don't let me fail them like I fail Marcus. Silence. No voice from heaven. No peace. Just the cold and the fear and the weight of choice. But Andrea started her car anyway. She drove to the Sullivan estate, grabbed her cleaning cart, walked through the servants' entrance. She walked into the mansion that night and saw the boys in their beds, eyes empty, staring at nothing. And she thought, not again, not on my watch. Andrea didn't know that in 2 hours, everything would change, and Tom's life would be in her hands. 1:47 a.m. Andrea was in the hallway, emptying her cleaning cart when the alarm went off. High-pitched, urgent, relentless. The boys' room. She ran. Tom was convulsing. Eyes rolled back into his skull. Body rigid, arching off the bed. Monitors screaming their electronic terror. Juan and Dave were shrieking, hands pressed over their ears, rocking violently in their beds. Andrea's hands shook as she slammed the emergency call button on the wall. Once, twice, 3 times. She grabbed the phone mounted beside it. Medical emergency, boys' wing. Now, the voice on the other end was calm. Too calm. Team is 15 minutes out. Stay on the line. 15 minutes. Andrea looked at the monitor. Tom's oxygen was dropping. 89%. 86. 83. She dropped the phone. Every instinct screamed, wait for the professionals. You're not trained. You'll make it worse. But she heard her grandmother's voice, clear as if Lucille were standing beside her. Baby, God doesn't call the equipped. He equips the called. Andrea moved. She pulled Tom into her arms, his small body convulsing, burning hot, muscles locked, and turned him on his side. 8 years ago, she'd been a nursing assistant before the hospital laid her off in budget cuts. Her hands remembered what her mind had tried to forget. Clear the airway. Protect the head. Don't restrain the body. She cradled him against her chest, kept his head stable, whispered through her tears. You're okay, baby. I'm here. You're safe. Lord, she prayed aloud, voice breaking. I don't know what I'm doing. Guide my hands. Don't let this baby die. Please, please. Tom's body jerked violently. His breathing was shallow, ragged, desperate. Andrea held him tighter, rocked gently, kept his airway clear. Come on, sweet boy. Come on. Stay with me. Seconds felt like hours. Then, slowly, so agonizingly slowly, Tom's body began to relax. The convulsions eased. His breathing deepened, steadied. The terrible rigidity melted from his muscles. The monitors stopped screaming. Andrea held him, tears streaming down her face, rocking him the way Grandma used to rock Marcus. Back and forth, back and forth. That's it, baby. That's it. I've got you. The door burst open. Dr. Brennan and 2 nurses rushed in, faces tight with professional urgency. Brennan's eyes went straight to Andrea, holding Tom in her arms, unauthorized, unqualified, explicitly forbidden, and his face went white. What are you? But he stopped, because Tom was breathing, stable, calm. The monitor showed oxygen at 94% and rising. Brennan moved quickly to the equipment, checked the readings, looked back at Tom, resting in Andrea's arms. How did you? Andrea's voice was barely a whisper. I didn't know what else to do. Brennan reached for Tom. Andrea handed him over carefully, her hands still trembling. Brennan laid Tom back in the bed, started running checks, pupils, pulse, respiratory rate. The nurses worked around him, adjusting monitors, recording vitals, whispering medical terminology Andrea couldn't follow. Andrea stepped back, pressed herself against the wall. Her legs felt like water. Her whole body shook. Then Tom's eyes opened. Slow, unfocused at first. He looked at the ceiling, at the bright lights, at Dr. Brennan's face hovering above him. Then he looked past Brennan, looked directly at Andrea, and his lips moved. Andrea. The room went completely silent. Dr. Brennan froze, syringe suspended in midair. The nurses stopped moving. Tom had never spoken. Not once. Not a single sound in 3 years of life. And his first word, his very first word, was her name. Andrea's knees buckled. She collapsed into the chair by the wall, hands covering her face, sobbing. Juan and Dave, still in their beds, reached toward her, whimpering, wanting her. And for the first time, Tom's eyes weren't empty anymore. They were full of light, full of life, full of recognition. He saw her. He knew her. Andrea thought it was over. She thought she'd saved him. Thought maybe, just maybe, everything would be okay. But 3 floors above, Kenneth Sullivan sat alone in his office, staring at the security feed on his laptop screen. And what he saw made his blood boil. Chapter 7. The Accusation. Kenneth couldn't sleep. At 2 a.m., he sat in his office staring at nothing. Pulled up the ICU security feed. Just routine monitoring. The timestamp read 1:47 a.m. Then the alarm went off on the feed. Tom was seizing, body arching, monitors flashing. Then Andrea, the cleaning woman, rushed into frame. Grabbed his son. Kenneth's heart stopped. She pulled Tom into her arms. Held him. She was unauthorized, untrained, explicitly forbidden from patient contact. And she was holding his medically fragile son during a seizure. Kenneth grabbed his phone. The audio feed was muted. He never turned it on, so he didn't hear Tom speak. Just saw an employee violating protocol, touching his son without permission. He dialed Dr. Brennan. Who the hell is that woman? And why is she touching my son? Brennan's voice was careful. Mr. Sullivan, she stabilized him before we arrived. I don't care. She's not medical staff. She could have killed him. Kenneth, I'm coming there. Now. He arrived at 3 a.m., stormed into the medical wing. Andrea sat in the hallway, still shaking, face pale. She stood when she saw him. Kenneth's voice was ice. You were explicitly told not to enter this room. Mr. Sullivan, I can explain. You endanger my son. You violated protocol. Dr. Brennan stepped out. Kenneth, she saved his life. Kenneth's jaw clenched. Or she caused the seizure. We don't know what she's been doing in here. Andrea's voice shook. I would never hurt them. You're fired. Effective immediately. And I'm calling the police. Andrea went white. Please. I was only trying to... Trying to what? Play doctor? These are my sons. Kenneth. Brennan's voice was firm. Tom spoke. After she helped him. His first word. He said her name. Kenneth froze. What? Andrea. Clear as day. Kenneth looked at Andrea. At her tears. Her trembling hands. He looked away. I don't care. She had no authority. File the report. I want her charged. Police arrived within an hour. Kenneth filed formal charges. Reckless endangerment. Unauthorized medical intervention. Trespassing. Andrea was taken in handcuffs. She didn't fight. Just let them lead her out, head down. As they passed the boys' room, she looked back. Tom was at the observation window. Hands pressed to glass. Tears streaming. Crying. Saying her name. Andrea. Andrea. Kenneth heard it. Finally heard his son's voice. Calling for her. Not for him. Juan and Dave pressed against the window, too. All 3 boys reaching. Crying. Andrea was escorted out. The door closed. The boys screamed. Tom's eyes, no longer empty, were full of tears, watching the only person who'd ever loved him being dragged away. Kenneth stood in the silence, listening to his son's cry. And for the first time, he hesitated, wondered if he'd made a terrible mistake. Andrea sat in a holding cell hours later, knowing she'd lost everything. But Kenneth was about to discover something that would shatter his world. Kenneth sat in his office as dawn broke, replaying the footage. Tom saying Andrea's name, over and over, his son's first word. And it wasn't Dad. It was the name of a woman Kenneth had just had arrested. He closed the laptop, called his attorney at 5:30 a.m. I want every medical file on my son's reviewed, every report, every scan, every note. I want to know what we missed. 6 hours later, the attorney called back. You need to see this. Kenneth drove to the law office. The attorney handed him a folder. Single document inside, buried deep. Dated 18 months ago. Title, Sullivan Triplets Developmental Assessment. Confidential Findings. Author, Dr. Marcus Brennan. Kenneth read it 3 times, hands shaking. Patient behavioral patterns consistent with institutional attachment disorder secondary to early maternal loss and prolonged clinical isolation. Neurological scans show no organic impairment. Recommend immediate cessation of pharmaceutical intervention and implementation of intensive relational bonding therapy with consistent primary caregiver. Prognosis, excellent with appropriate intervention. Kenneth's vision blurred. His sons weren't brain damaged. They were traumatized, touch-starved, and Brennan had known. At the bottom, handwritten notation. Discuss with team. Consensus. Current protocol yielding stable data. Recommend maintaining observation status. Family notification. Deferred. Continue neurological hypothesis in external communications. Date-stamped memo 3 months later. Mr. Sullivan inquired progress. Advised no significant improvement. Condition likely permanent. Recommended contract extension. Approved 6 months, $240,000. Kenneth's chest caved in. Brennan had known for 18 months the boys could be helped, that they just needed love. And he buried it, because curing them meant losing $500,000 a year. Kenneth grabbed his phone. Dial Brennan. You knew. His voice was deadly quiet. You knew, and you lied to me. Silence. I found a report, Marcus. 18 months ago. You told me they'd never get better. The whole time you knew. Brennan's voice went careful. Kenneth, the science was inconclusive. You watched my son suffer because you wanted to keep billing me. That's not. You're fired. All of you. And I'm reporting you to the medical board. You'll never practice again. Kenneth hung up, drove to the police station, asked to see Andrea Boykin. She sat on a bench in the holding cell, head in her hands. Exhausted. Hopeless. She looked up when the door opened. Saw Kenneth. Went pale. Kenneth walked in and fell to his knees. I'm so sorry. Andrea stared. You saw them, Kenneth whispered. You saw what I couldn't. You loved them when I was too afraid to. And I had you arrested. Tears ran down his face. I don't deserve forgiveness. But I'm begging you. Please, come back. My sons need you. Andrea's voice was soft. Mr. Sullivan, I didn't do it for you. I did it for them. I know. That's why I'm asking. Andrea thought of the boy's eyes, no longer empty, but full of hope. Maybe this is what God was preparing me for all along. What happened next would change all of their lives forever. Kenneth paid Andrea's grandmother's medical bills in full. For the next 5 years, dropped all charges, expunged her record, hired her as the boy's full-time caregiver at $120,000 a year, gave her a suite in the mansion. You're not staff, you're family. Within 3 months, all 3 boys were speaking. Juan said Dad for the first time on a Tuesday morning. Kenneth was reading to them, something Andrea taught him, and Juan looked up and said it. Dad. Kenneth wept. Dave started asking questions. Why is the sky blue? Where do birds go at night? Tom sang Andrea's spirituals at bedtime. His eye is on the sparrow, clutching the faded cloth doll. Dr. Brennan lost his medical license. Kenneth's lawsuit exposed a pattern. Brennan had done this to 4 other families, prolonging treatment for profit. The case made national news. Kenneth testified before Congress, pushed for legislation against medical billing fraud. He wanted the world to know what greed had cost. Kenneth started joining Andrea in the boys' room. At first just watching, afraid. Then one night, Andrea handed him a book. Read to them. Kenneth's hand shook. He sat down. One climbed into his lap. Kenneth read Goodnight Moon, while tears ran down his face. For the first time in 3 years, he held his sons. They didn't flinch. They leaned into him. Andrea took the boys to visit Lucille one Saturday. Lucille looked at Andrea through the fog and said clearly, "Baby, you did it. You kept your promise." It was the last coherent thing she said. She passed 2 weeks later, peacefully. At the funeral, Kenneth stood beside Andrea. She raised a miracle. Andrea smiled through tears. "No, she taught me to see them." 1 year later, the mansion looked different. Medical wing converted to a playroom. Toys on the floor. Crayon drawings on walls. Laughter in hallways that used to be silent. The boys ran through the house, calling for Andrea, calling for Dad. Andrea sat in the garden watching them. Kenneth joined her. "I never asked. Why did you keep coming back?" Even after the warning, Andrea was quiet. "Because when I looked at them, I didn't see patients, Mr. Sullivan. I saw children. And I couldn't walk past children who needed love and do nothing." Kenneth nodded. "I'm glad you didn't." He paused. "I want to make you their legal co-guardian. If something happens to me, I need to know they'll have you." Andrea's eyes filled. "You mean that? You're their mother in every way that matters." That night, Andrea knelt beside her bed. "Thank you, Lord, for putting them in my path, for giving me the courage to stay, for showing me that love doesn't need credentials. It just needs willing hands." She looked at the photo on her nightstand. The boys, arms around each other, eyes full of wonder. No longer empty, no longer alone. Kenneth looked into his son's eyes, no longer empty, but full of wonder, and saw Catherine. Not the loss, the gift. Kenneth and Andrea, side by side, watching the boys play. A family healed, not by wealth, not by credentials, but by love. If this story touched your heart, I need you to know something. YouTube only shows stories like this to people who actually engage. If you've been watching without subscribing, the algorithm thinks you don't care. And tomorrow, when I post about the billionaire who secretly watched his paralyzed triplets at night and saw what the maid was doing that left him speechless, you'll never see them. So do this right now. Hit subscribe. That tells YouTube you want more of these stories, and smash the like button. Moreover, this channel needs you. We're a family here, not just an audience. Every subscription, every like, every share helps us reach more people who need hope. And in a world that feels darker every day, these stories matter. So if you believe that too, join our family by subscribing now. Your support means everything. God bless you.